The bell calls us together in covenant, to share, to reflect, to hear with open hearts. Today, let us especially remember our covenant to affirm and promote the fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Charles Chauncey rejected such Calvinist doctrines as total depravity and predestination. Chauncey was also a Universalist. Chauncey completed his major theological work, The Mystery Hid from Ages and Generations, in 1765, but for 20 years could not bring himself to publish it. Finally, late in life, anonymously, he published his book, 400 pages of biblical support for universal salvation, that God wills and ensures the salvation of all humanity. Charles Chauncey is understood by most scholars to have had an Arian Christology. Quick review of Christology. In the first 3 centuries after Jesus' death, Christian churches understood Jesus in a variety of ways. In particular, there was a split between those who said he was the equal of God and those who didn't. At the Council of Nicaea in 325, Arius and his supporters were outvoted, and Trinitarianism was established as orthodoxy, though the Arian form of Christianity continued for a few more hundred years among some of the European peoples that succeeded the Roman Empire. Fausto Sozzini went a step further than Arius, arguing that Jesus was not the equal of God and was not divine, though he was worthy of worship. English Unitarian Theophilus Lindsay went further still, taking the position that only God Yahweh was worthy of worship. Among the Congregationalist churches around the Boston area in the 18th century, this sequence seemed to be repeating. Jonathan Mayhew, minister of Boston's West Church and 15 years younger than Charles Chauncey, went a step further than Chauncey had. Mayhew was clear and outspoken in rejecting the Trinity and upholding the strict unity of God. Mayhew also opposed all creeds, arguing that there can be no greater authority than private judgment in religion.
Our welcoming hymn is number 1000. So it's an important thing to note that we'd like you to hum today instead of singing out loud. And you'll raise your voices in that way. I, as your hymn leader, as well as anyone who might be singing during service, takes COVID tests each week to confirm a negative result so that we can all feel comfortable. So I'll ask you to rise in body or spirit for our welcoming hymn, number 1000, Morning Has Come. Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills the moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation at White Plains, New York, on land originally of the Lenape Nation. I'm Emily Economo, your worship associate this morning. It's the 5th Sunday of autumn, which we represent by the 5 candles to my left. And changing leaves are resplendent in parts of Westchester. I can always count on a couple of trees that start to turn first near my home, and those have turned. The hunter's moon was full last Tuesday night and Wednesday morning and is now waning gibbous. A special welcome to our visitors. If you are a first-time visitor who is in our sanctuary, we invite you, if you feel comfortable, to stand or raise a hand so that we may recognize and welcome you. And if you are online, we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. For those joining us virtually, you will find a link to the order of service on our website at cucwp.org. Our website also offers resources to help keep us connected, as well as a donate button. If you're joining us on Zoom, we invite you to light a chalice or candle at home as we light the chalice here. And if you're here in the sanctuary, we ask that you silence your phones. Now, please join me in our chalice lighting. On the 5th Sunday of the season, we dedicate our chalice to the 5th principle of our faith, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. Please say with me the chalice lighting words from the Passover Haggadah on the screen. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
Good morning, everyone. One of the ironies of 20th century American culture is that for all its homophobia, sexism, and machismo, the sound of America was largely defined by the voices of gay male composers. George Gershwin was one of them. This is the second of his 3 preludes, works Gershwin premiered at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan in 1926.
Good morning, everyone. Today we offer one another passing of the peace in American Sign Language. And in order to do that, we take our two hands, rotate them, and press down. Peace be with you all collectively, or peace be with you individually. And to return the greeting, you make the hang 10 sign with your thumb and finger sticking out, and you point the thumb to yourself and the pinky to the person you're replying the greeting towards. So it's, and also with you. So please turn to one another and in American Sign Language say, peace be with you.
If you have a joy, sorrow, or milestone that you'd like to share, you may enter it into our book of joys and sorrows. For our online folks, you can type your joy or sorrow into the chat, and please make the first word be joy, sorrow, or milestone so I can tell which messages are meant to say out loud. October is LGBTQ History Month, and that is our focus of worship this morning. And so we begin with a poem by Audre Lorde called A Litany for Survival. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward at once, before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. And when the sun sets, we're afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we're afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we're afraid we may never eat again. And when we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it's better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
We would be one as now we join in humming our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community.
The mission of Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation is the covenant of this congregation. Would all the members and visitors who would like to affirm it along with me? We covenant to nurture each other in our spiritual journeys, foster compassion and understanding within and beyond our community, and engage in service to transform ourselves and our world.
Good morning, voters. I trust we don't need to remind you how important it is that you vote in every election. In Westchester, we're choosing local leaders and judges who will determine the quality of life and justice in our county. And please note that this year the ballot is two-sided. On the back are 5 New York State proposals and 1 for Westchester. You heard last week about proposal number 2 from the state, the right to clean air and water. Another would let voter registration happen right up to Election Day, and a third authorizes absentee voting for any reason whatsoever. The Westchester proposal is about a code of ethics, and these are all important issues. Need your vote. You probably know that early voting has begun and is going on all this week. One advantage to early voting is that there are more likely to be no lines at all, and you can pick a day when the weather is decent. I voted yesterday in less than 5 minutes. Did anybody else vote yesterday? Yay. If you're here at the service, you can pick up a list of early voting sites and times as you leave, just to make it easier for you. But you'll also find that and information about all that's on the ballot in any state or county at a handy website, Vote 411. Vote 411. Please vote. Democracy and justice are preserved first on a local level. Thank you.
Our 5th principle, our covenant to affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of democratic process, expresses our commitment both to individual conscience and to democracy. The morning offertory also expresses both those commitments. The beloved community is truly the work of the people. There is no other support for this congregation but yours. Upon your conscience, we depend, as well as the vote of your feet to be here, the vote of your hands, the vote during elections, and of your wallet to sustain and grow this community of memory and hope. For together we bring our generosity to effect healing. For October, our Share the Plate funds go to the Westchester Community College Student Emergency Fund, which offers financial support for students in need to help them stay in school. You can make your contribution for the congregation, the plate share, your pledge, and the minister's discretionary fund by placing your donation in the basket provided or by using the QR code on your paper order of service. Those watching online may use the QR code on the order of service email or the donate button on our website. An offering will be given and received.
And now, music by a nice Jewish boy from Brooklyn who immortalized the American frontier with a mixture of sentimentality and modernism in ballets like Appalachian Spring, Billy the Kid, and Rodeo. Here's one of his miniatures for piano called Sentimental Melody.
Will you pray with me? Dear ground of being, universe of accident and design and surpassing mystery, as we are gathered here today, let us give voice to that for which we are grateful. The rich autumn colors and the fallen leaves, the new buds for the spring already beginning to slowly form. Thank you. And we're thankful for the caring work of those developing vaccines. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention signed off on the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson coronavirus boosters. Thank you. And the Food and Drug Administration scientists said Friday the likely benefits of the Pfizer vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds outweighed the risks. It is a step on the way toward availability of a vaccine for children that young. Thank you. India administered its billionth COVID-19 vaccine dose on Thursday as that country, which was seeing almost 5,000 COVID deaths a day last May, is now losing less than 200 a day. Thank you. In prayer, we also give voice to grief and to hope. We grieve the ongoing loss from the coronavirus, which has now taken the lives of an estimated 4.96 million. We grieve the violation of reproductive rights, as the Supreme Court on Friday said it would let Texas continue enforcing a new law that bans most abortions in the state. We pray for greater wisdom and compassion for state legislatures. We grieve for the suffering of migrants. Federal authorities apprehended more than 1.7 million migrants along the US-Mexico border over the 12 months that ended in September. That's the most ever in a single fiscal year. We pray for greater wisdom and compassion. We grieve for the suffering related to climate change. 2 reports this week said that heat deaths, infectious diseases, hunger, and other health problems linked to climate change are getting worse as global temperatures rise. We pray for the wisdom and courage to take stronger action, for as Greta Thunberg tells us, the one thing we need more than hope is action. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. And as Thich Nhat Hanh tells us, we are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness. May it be so. These prayers flow from hearts which both ache and rejoice. We ask of ourselves the mindful intention to delight in what is good, confront what is cruel, heal what is broken. And we'll observe now a moment of silent meditation, followed by musical meditation, and then sing along with the sung response. Blessed be. Amen.
In 1875, the composer Tchaikovsky accepted a commission from a musical journal to provide a piano piece for each month of the year. His piece of the month for October was subtitled Autumn Song, and it was prefaced with this verse by the writer Tolstoy: "Autumn, our poor garden is all withered, the yellowed leaves are flying in the wind."
calling all you hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You who wander, you who thirst, I offer you this heart of mine. Calling all you hungry spirits, all you lost and left behind. All I can, I'll share with you. Your joy and your sorrow, I make it mine.
Four to remember. Our brain chooses what to perceive based on the questions we ask ourselves. The four to remember are four questions that connect you with what is positive and true. If you're always asking, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with them, you'll feel morose. Successes, gratitudes, love, and self-appreciation. Those are the four to remember. So these are the questions to ask yourself about. What small successes have I had recently? What could I feel grateful for? Who do I love, or who loves me? What do I appreciate about myself? Each of these questions can be like a flashlight that helps you see past your inner darkness to the heaven within. It only takes 1 or 2 minutes of focusing on any of these questions to change what you perceive and how you feel. Be sure to think of specific instances when you felt what the question is asking you about. They need not be big dramatic examples. They only need to be times that were emotionally meaningful for you. To change how you feel, ask yourself the right questions. And the four to remember are, what small successes have I had recently? What could I be grateful for? Who do I love, or who loves me? And what do I appreciate about myself? For more details about this practice, see the post at cucmatters.org. Ask yourself about successes, gratitudes, love, self-appreciation. The link is in your eCommunitarian.
Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 187. It sounds along the ages. Please hum along with me.
It sounds along the ages, soul answering to soul. It kindles on the pages of every Bible scroll. The psalmist heard and sang it, from martyr lips it broke, and prophet tongues outrang it, till sleeping nations woke. From Sinai's cliffs it echoed, it breathed from Buddha's tree. It charmed in Athens market, it hallowed Galilee. The hammer stroke of Luther, the pilgrim seaside prayer, the oracles of Concord, one holy word declare. It calls in low new justice, it speaks and low new truth, in ever nobler stature and unexhausted youth, forever unresounding and knowing not of time. Our laws but catch the music of its eternal chime.
Sounds along the ages. Charmed in Athens market at hallowed Galilee, we might add some lines about how it sounded from Stonewall in 1969. It calls, and lo, new truth. Today we're going to look at LGBTQ History Month, how it began and its purpose, and we will name the 31 LGBTQ folk whose contributions are particularly being recognized for the 2021 version of LGBTQ History Month. And then we will turn to the deeper matter of queerness itself has changed history and changed all of us. I believe that we are here to love. So how we express love, with whom, when, and how are central to who we are. Through history, LGBTQ folks have revealed to all of us truths about what love is, and therefore truths about what being a human is. There's a lot to be said about the ways Western society became so persecution-oriented, about the horrible ways that same-gender sexual contact has been suppressed, repressed, shamed, stigmatized, and severely punished, and about why persecuting people who engaged that behavior seemed so important for so many centuries. I acknowledge that. Today, however, we will be looking at the changing nature of affectional relationships, which might or might not have included sexual contact. A couple centuries ago, friendships could be passionate, even romantic, and even maybe include a certain erotic quality and not involve or desire sexual contact. We will see how that changed and how the phenomena of film and TV called the bromance signals yet another new shift. It's a story about a growth of freedom, a growth of our humanity, and it's one for which all of us can be thankful for the queer folk that have been among us and are the crucial drivers of that story. To begin, October is LGBTQ History Month. June, so you don't confuse it, is LGBTQ Pride Month. History, as we all know, is not the same thing as pride, and it's good to have and honor both. Pride Month was inspired by the Stonewall Uprising in June of 1969, 52 years ago. It's for recognizing the contributions of LGBTQ folk on local, national, and international society. LGBTQ History Month is a little bit newer. The first March on Washington for LGBTQ rights was October 11th, 1979. 9 years after that, in 1988, the anniversary of that march began being recognized as National Coming Out Day every October 11th. National Coming Out Day expresses the recognition that homophobia depends on ignorance, and ignorance depends on silence. So it was a day for coming out, for breaking silence, for letting family or friends who might not know it, that they do, in fact, have loved ones who are lesbian or gay, or, as began being stressed a bit later, are transgender, bisexual, or some form of queer. If more people know more people identified as LGBTQ, then oppressive attitudes toward LGBTQ will wane. National Coming Out Day is grounded in the perception that the personal is political, and the most basic form of activism is coming out to family, friends, colleagues, and living life as openly LGBT or Q. It's important to keep in mind that coming out is not always safe. Our job, I believe, whether we are ourselves LGBTQ or not, is to be supportive of those who do come out and of those who see the danger as just too great. 6 years after the beginning of National Coming Out Day in 1994, a Missouri history teacher named Rodney Wilson founded LGBTQ History Month. It's in October so that it can include National Coming Out Day. And since it began, other October events have arisen that fold into LGBTQ History Month. For instance, Ally Week. In October 2005, a national youth-led effort encouraged students to be allies with the LGBTQ folk in their community in standing against bullying, harassment, and name-calling. That was called Ally Week, and it's usually observed in September or October, taking place in K through 12 schools and colleges, and often, but not always, coinciding with National Coming Out Day. During Ally Week, people are encouraged to sign an ally pledge, taking a stand for safe and harassment-free school for all students, and they will not use LGBTQ slurs, and that they will intervene to stop bullying and harassment. Ally Week lets our LGBTQ friends know that peer support for them is stronger than they might think. And then in 2010, the Canadian teenager Brittany McMillan started Spirit Day on the third Thursday of October. It was October 21 this year. Spirit Day was created in response to bullying-related suicides of gay school students in 2010. Observers of that day wear the color purple as a visible sign of support for LGBTQ youth and against bullying. Finally, also in October, on October 12th, is the anniversary of the 1998 murder of Matthew Shepard. All of that is folded into LGBTQ History Month. If you didn't know, now you know. We have this month to highlight and celebrate the history and achievements of people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, or any form of queer. Equality Forum, an LGBT civil rights organization with an educational focus, coordinates LGBTQ History Month and produces documentary films. The History Month each year selects 31 historically significant people. In the spirit of Say Their Name, here are the 2021 LGBT History Month icons. Susan B. Anthony, W.H. Auden, Frank Bruni, Frederick Chopin, David Cicilline, Mark Crowley, Ashley Diamond, Alice Dunbar Nelson, Carlos Elizondo, Althea Garrison, R.C. Gorman, L.Z. Granderson, Bob Hattoy, Jerry Herman, Janice Ian, Karine Jean-Pierre, Janis Joplin, Liberace, Claude McKay, Stacy Milburn, Shannon Minter, Janelle Monáe, Javier Morgado, Henry Munoz III, Johnny Phelps, Little Richard, Suezin Tet, Mark Tecano, Richie Torres, Mary Trump, and Darren Walker. The contributions of LGBTQ people need to be honored. And I want to think about the history beyond the famous contributors to society, the thousands of queer folk who never got famous, whose names will never be intoned beyond immediate family. Just by being who they were, they shifted and enriched our understanding of the possibilities of being human. Attitudes about relationships and about sex have undergone profound change in the last couple hundred years in weird society. That's weird as in W-E-I-R-D, Western educated, industrial, rich democracies. So we will look into some of that change after our break. But for now, Adam?
Thank you, Reverend Meredith. Another name to add to the list, perhaps Francis Poulenc, a nice Catholic boy in this case, heir to the French pharmaceutical fortune known as Ron Poulenc, Francis disappointed his parents by not following in the family business and by preferring the company of men. Lucky for us that Poulenc, whom one critic described as half monk, half naughty boy, followed his calling and left us some of the most charming music of the 20th century. Here are two of his earliest works, two of his mouvements perpétuels or perpetual movements for piano.
couple hundred years ago, it was widely understood that the purpose of sex was procreation. It's not that most 18th century marriages were full-on arranged, but many of them kind of were. Parents had a role in the courtship process. Asking the father's permission wasn't entirely a quaint little ritual ceremony like it is today. and getting married for love was a little bit edgy. Today, marriage and childbearing are avenues for enriching your life. For the earlier era, for the wealthy, childbearing was about preserving the estate, and for everyone else, it was about survival. The family farm or small business needed young labor. If the married couple loved each other, that was nice, but it wasn't essential. And sex was for reproduction. If for some couples, it was also a deeply fulfilling, intimate bonding of two souls, again, that was nice, but it was extra. So connect the dots here. When sex and marriage aren't so much about love and affection, then expressions of love and affection aren't so much about sex. Thus, it was a time when two people of the same sex might walk down a sidewalk with arms around each other, or hug, or hold hands, or kiss, and these expressions of mutual affection might or might not have gone along with sexual contact. The emotions that we today associate with being lovers in a sexual relationship were free to express themselves in intimate, non-sexual friendships. There might be a lot of touching, hand holdings, hugs, caresses, and the touching and whispered words of devotion might even have had an erotic quality without there being an expectation or hope or desire for genital contact. Here's a fairly typical example. In the early 18th century, Susanna Anthony wrote a letter to her friend, Sarah Osborne. She wrote, "My bosom friend, I feel my love to you to be without dissimulation, therefore wish you the same strength and consolation with my very own soul." That's how close friends talked in those days. It might have been erotically charged, or it might have included full-on sex or the desire for it, but it might not have been any of those. Close friends today don't write that sort of love letter unless they are in or headed toward a sexual relationship. Or consider what Marquis de Lafayette wrote to General George Washington in 1779. "My dear General, there never was a friend, my dear General, so much, so tenderly beloved, as I love and respect you, happy in our union, in the pleasure of living near to you, in the pleasing satisfaction of partaking every sentiment of your heart, every event of your life. I have taken such a habit of being inseparable from you that I cannot now accustom myself to your absence, and I am more and more afflicted at the enormous distance that keeps me so far from my dearest friend." Were Washington and Lafayette sleeping together? Well, of course, sleeping together is yet another term that doesn't mean what it did, for in those days, sharing a bed for the night was common and did not imply intimacy. The correspondence between the two men lasted for decades. Washington was known as cool, detached, and standoffish, and his early letters to Lafayette were curt and businesslike, but over time, Washington too was writing very long letters filled with unbridled affection. Each man would refer to the other as "the man I love." Historians generally tend to guess that the relationship wasn't sexual, but we don't know. And the interpretation of their relationship seems to depend more on the interests of the interpreter than on the evidence. Still, we have to say it was a time when passionate expressions of love were common among platonic friends. In the times since then, as we've moved further and further away from thinking of the purpose of sex as being reproduction, as sex has become more singularly an expression of love, then love between two non-related adults became more singularly expressed in sex, which made platonic relationships more hesitant about expressing effusive affection. Interestingly, though, our popular media may be swinging back to more interest in the emotional intimacy and bondedness of same-sex platonic friendship. Consider the recent phenomena of the bromance movie. a film depicting a relationship that's like a romance, that is a romance between two bros, two men, not sexually involved with each other. Now, this is different from the buddy film. The buddy film has been around about as long as film has been around, often in comedies. Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, down to Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. For non-comedic buddy films, the paradigm is the 1969 Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The buddy film situates the pair in some adventure, quest, or road trip scenario, which is then played for laughs if it's a comedy and played as an action movie if it's not. Buddy films about two women have been, for most of film history, less common, but ever since 1991's Thelma and Louise have increased in popularity. The bromance, however, is distinct from the buddy film. In the buddy films, the focus is on the adventure, on the comedic or the action situations. In the bromance, the focus is the relationship itself, the affection, and what's called the homosocial bonding. 1989, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was a comedic buddy film on the verge of making space for the bromance. In that film, there's a scene where Bill and Ted, in a moment of exuberant glee, hug each other and then step back and call each other a slur for gay. American young men were nervous about expressing affection. And the very act of comedically articulating that nervousness seems to have triggered other filmmakers to begin asking, well, why can't guys like each other and talk like they do? And so 1991 brought us The Fisher King. The Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges relationship wasn't called a bromance, but it was a turn toward films that contemplated a masculinity that required sensitive relations between men. And that was followed in 1994 by The Shawshank Redemption, in which Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman have a relationship that is nuanced and tender. By 2009, we had the Paul Rudd, Jason Segel comedy, I Love You, Man. It was not great cinematic art, and one reviewer called it a watered-down false bromance. Still, I Love You, Man, with its subtitle, Are You Man Enough to Say It?, reflected the big shift in the way that we conceive masculinity. It's interesting in this regard that the female counterpart of the bromance, for which such names have been suggested as the womance or sisterhood or the girl-lationship, is not as distinct from the buddy film as it is for the men. And that's because female friendship has historically tended to express more emotional intimacy than male buddies have. They didn't have to add a relationship focus because they always had it. Thelma and Louise and Cagney and Lacey paid more attention to the characters' feelings for each other than Butch and Sundance ever did. The bromance begins to close that gap. The rise of the bromance both reflects and propels a shift in consciousness. Society's growing acceptance of male romance that is sexual corresponds to a growing acceptance of male romance that isn't sexual. In this new consciousness, as sociologist Peter Nardi says, men are less afraid of being perceived as gay. It's become more acceptable for them to show emotion. The increased closeness goes beyond being mere friends to a deep bond that's been characterized as capturing the conceptual edge of is gay, is not gay. In some ways, it's a return to those passionate homosocial friendships of previous centuries, but those were friendships within a context of profound shame and persecution around any sex outside marriage, particularly same-gender sexual relations. This time, it's occurring in the context of and supported by the easing of the stigma around same-gender sexual relations. It's a new construction this time around. And I need to acknowledge the great importance of films that actually depict LGBT relations in all of their non-platonic glory. Films such as 1992's The Crying Game, 2005's Brokeback Mountain, and Carol in 2015, Moonlight in 2016, Call Me by Your Name in 2017, to name just a few, are beautiful and powerful films that changed viewers and changed society. What the bromance shows us is just how profound that change, a long time coming, well before it was expressed in film, has been for straight and LGBTQ people alike. We, all of us, live in a world with more freedom about who and how to love. Just one part of what that means is that friendship, even romance, even somewhat erotically charged romance, need not be or have any interest in becoming sexual. And that's why today I say, thank God for queer folk, because there have been those among us who were on the edges. All of us can now express a fuller level of love, a fuller level of our humanity. It was the queer folk who, from the beginning, showed the world that sex didn't have to be about procreation. They got a lot of very harsh reactivity for that, but the idea gradually got through. Sex is about love. Even when it happens to also be about procreation, it has to be about love. And that led first to a dampening down of emotional expressiveness within same-sex friendships. If sex was about love, then love was about sex. So non-sexual friendship went through a long period of shying away from expressions of love. And it was the queer folk who also helped the world see that passionate same-sex affection is acceptable. And from there, we began to rediscover that affection in non-sexual relationships. The LGBTQ movement is making not just sex, but love freer, more open, deeper, and a greater fulfillment of our humanity. Thank God, indeed, for queer folk. Amen.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 1028, The Fire of Commitment. See, they're both in 5.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Thank you for being with us in person and virtually. This morning, we share our gratitude for our team, Christian Force, our sanctuary audio video coordinator and Zoom host, Kim Force, who produces our media, Pam Parker, who keeps us all organized and informed, Jane Dixon, Mary Cavallaro, who greeted you in the building, and Ginny Strand, who greeted you in the chat stream, and Charlie McNally and others who helped with ushering this morning. Online today after worship is the second group discussion of the book Cast, facilitated by the Racial Justice Team in room Zoom 6161. I'm just about done with the book Cast, and I can say that it is amazing. And I would also like to point out that the book is called Cast. It's about race, but it's also about democracy, which is the fifth principle we talked about a lot this morning. And the subtitle of the book is The Origins of Our Discontents. So it's about all of us and our democracy and so forth, and I highly recommend it. And there's an email that went out that gives some information about the book discussions. Also, the next 2 Sundays, we hold our virtual Inquirers series sessions for people new to UU and new to CUUC. You can RSVP online for these events. There will be no in-person or virtual coffee hour after worship today. Pickup today for youth group will be at 11:15 outside in front of the RE doors. Pickup for childcare is 11:45 in the playground. For October, our share of the plate funds, just a reminder, goes to Westchester Community College Student Emergency Funds. After our closing music, we invite you to wish each other peace with the words, "Be safe and be well." Now for our chalice extinguishing. As we extinguish our chalice here, we invite those of you on Zoom to extinguish your chalice at home. Please say with me the words on the screen. Our chalice extinguished, the flame of conscience and the light of the democratic method are now ours to carry forth.
For our benediction, I read from Michael Bronski's A Queer History of the United States. The idea of America has existed in some form for 500 years. LGBT people, despite enormous struggles to be accepted and to be given equality, have made America what it is today. That great, fascinating, complicated, sometimes horrible, sometimes wonderful place that it was in the beginning. Go in peace.